After the accident in turn 4 at the end of the Daytona 500, we've lost Dale Earnhardt.
The crash that shocked the world on February 18, 2001, during the final lap of the Daytona 500, one of the most respected and legendary drivers in NASCAR history, Dale Earnhardt, was killed in a crash that stunned the world. At first, the crash didn't look serious. It seemed like just a small bump into the wall during an intense finish to an already exciting race. Millions of viewers watched on live television and didn't immediately realize the severity of what had just happened. But what looked like a minor accident was actually fatal. Earnhardt, known as the Intimidator, had died instantly. The way he crashed, the position of his car, and the injuries he suffered revealed something far more serious beneath the surface. Over time, it became clear that there were many warning signs, missed safety measures, and personal choices that led to his tragic death. What happened in those final seconds on the track would change NASCAR forever. This wasn't just about a crash, it was about a culture that ignored warnings until it was too late. A celebration turned tragedy. 2001 Daytona 500 was supposed to be a day of celebration and a fresh start for NASCAR. The sport had just signed a huge television deal with Fox Sports, and the world was watching. The excitement was sky high, and fans filled the stands. Even football legend Terry Bradshaw was there as the Grand Marshal. The night before the race, Earnhardt had given Bradshaw a thrilling ride around the track, full of his usual bold moves. Everything pointed to this being a milestone race that would bring more popularity to NASCAR. Dale Earnhardt, the 7-time champion, was at the center of attention. He had overcome recent injuries and doubts about retirement. His presence symbolized the strength and excitement of the sport. But underneath the celebrations, there were quiet signs that something wasn't right. Friends recalled Dale acting differently, more reflective, more emotional. He had even said things like, "That's if I make it that far," during meetings. These comments seemed strange at the time, but after the crash, they became chilling memories that hinted he may have sensed something was coming. Missed warnings and strange goodbyes. In the days leading up to the Daytona 500, Dale Earnhardt showed behavior that caught the attention of people close to him. During an interview just 2 days before the race, he suddenly became emotional, saying he was a lucky man and talking about how happy he was with his life, marriage, and cars. Some people later said it felt like he was saying goodbye without realizing it. The night before the race, he met with old friend Terry Labonte to finalize a business deal. After signing the paperwork, Earnhardt said, "That's if I make it that far." People in the room laughed, assuming it was a joke, but Earnhardt didn't laugh. He stayed silent. His son, Dale Earnhardt Jr., also recalled something unusual. His father came over to encourage him before the race, something he rarely did. These small, emotional moments now stand out as signs that something deeper was going on inside Dale's mind. Perhaps he felt something he couldn't explain. Sadly, those moments would be the last time many people saw him alive. The fight over safety device, one of the most heartbreaking parts of Dale Earnhardt's death, is that it could have been prevented. In the year before the crash, 3 young NASCAR drivers, Adam Petty, Kenny Irwin Jr., and Tony Roper, had all died from the same type of injury, a basilar skull fracture. Experts had developed a safety device called the heartache device, which could protect drivers from this type of fatal injury by holding the head and neck steady in a crash. However, many drivers were hesitant to wear it, including Earnhardt. He was strongly against it and once even called it that damn noose. When NASCAR held a safety demonstration, Earnhardt refused to attend. On race day in 2001, only 5 drivers out of 43 wore the heartache device. One of them was Kyle Petty, whose son Adam had died the year before. The man who helped design the device, Dr. Robert Hubbard, was actually in the garage that day, just feet away from Dale. But Dale didn't want to listen. He believed in his old school ways and wasn't convinced that new safety equipment was necessary. That decision would cost him his life. A race filled with action. Daytona 500 that year was exactly the kind of race NASCAR wanted. It had speed, drama, and excitement from start to finish. There were 49 lead changes and 14 different drivers leading at different points. Earnhardt himself led the race for times. Fans were thrilled. The crowd roared every time the black No. 3 car moved to the front. NASCAR executives watched with pride as their broadcast deal with Fox was paying off with a thrilling show. But then came a massive crash with 25 laps to go. 20 cars were involved in a pileup on the backstretch, including Tony Stewart's car, which flipped through the air. Despite the horror of the crash, Stewart walked away without serious injury. NASCAR later found out that the force of the crash was absorbed by the steering wheel and safety systems inside the car, but Dale Earnhardt wasn't as lucky. After seeing the crash, he radioed to Richard Childress and said, "They're going. They have to do something about these cars, or they're going to get someone killed." Just 20 laps later, his own life would be lost on the same track. Dale becomes the protector as the race approached its final moments. Dale Earnhardt was in a unique position. His cars, driven by Michael Waltrip and Dale Earnhardt Jr., were leading. For the first time in his Daytona 500 career, Dale wasn't racing to win for himself. He was protecting his son and teammate. He moved behind them and began blocking other drivers from catching up. He weaved across the track, creating a wall behind his cars to prevent others from making a move. At 180 miles per hour, this was an incredibly risky thing to do, but he kept doing it lap after lap. It was one of the most unselfish acts seen on the track. He wanted his team to win even if it meant sacrificing his own chance at victory. For 17 laps, he held off some of NASCAR's most aggressive drivers like Sterling Marlin and Rusty Wallace. The final lap approached, and it looked like his plan was going to work. Waltrip and Earnhardt Jr. were pulling away. The crowd was going wild. Everything was going perfectly until at WAS in single quotes T. The final 80 milliseconds as the cars raced through the final turn of the final lap, Sterling Marlin made a last effort to pass Earnhardt. Dale dropped down to block. Ken Schrader's car was close behind. The three cars made contact. Dale's car veered up the track and slammed into the wall. It didn't look like a major crash. There was no flip, no explosion, no fire. But in that split second, just 80 milliseconds, Dale Earnhardt was killed. The angle of the impact, the speed, and the lack of head support caused his skull to fracture. He died instantly. The moment was confusing to everyone watching. Commentators didn't realize the severity. His son and teammates celebrated their finish, unaware that Dale was not responding inside his car. It wasn't until officials reached his vehicle that they realized he wasn't moving. The silence that followed was deafening. What looked like a normal end to a thrilling race had just taken one of the greatest drivers of all time. A legacy of change. The news of Dale Earnhardt's death spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the sports world. Fans were heartbroken. Drivers were devastated. NASCAR was forced to take a hard look at its safety practices. Within months, the HOMS device became mandatory. Cars were redesigned for better protection. Safer barriers were added to walls. The way races were run and how drivers were protected would never be the same. Dale Earnhardt didn't die in vain. His death saved lives. Today, many crashes that once would have been fatal now end with drivers walking away safely. The man known as the Intimidator became the reason for a safer future. He gave everything for the sport he loved, even his life, and in doing so, he left behind not just memories, but real, lasting change that continues to protect drivers to this day. The moment everything went wrong in February 18, 2001, the world of NASCAR changed forever. During the final lap of the Daytona 500, one of racing's most beloved figures, Dale Earnhardt, was caught in a crash that at first glance didn't seem deadly. He had moved down the track to block another driver, Sterling Marlin, but he hadn't completely cleared him. Their cars made slight contact. This small mistake caused Earnhardt's car to turn left suddenly and slide down to the flat part of the track. For a brief moment, it looked like he might regain control. His car began correcting its path, pointing back toward the raceway, but physics had already taken over, and there was no turning back. His black No. 3 Chevrolet Monte Carlo darted back up the track, crossing in front of oncoming traffic, with cars racing three wide. There was no space to avoid a crash. Ken Schrader, who was right behind him, had no time to move. Schrader's car slammed into the passenger side of Earnhardt's, sending both vehicles directly toward the outer wall at a terrifying speed. A crash that looked normal, but wasn't in the NASCAR broadcast booth. Darrell Waltrip was cheering as his brother Michael was about to win his first race. But out of the corner of his eye, he saw the No. 3 car slide out of control. To viewers at home, the crash didn't seem alarming. Compared to other violent wrecks, this one looked simple. The car wasn't on fire. It wasn't destroyed. People assumed Dale Earnhardt would simply step out and give his usual thumbs up. But this crash was anything but normal. His car hit the concrete wall and turned for at an estimated 160 miles per hour. The angle of impact wasn't head-on, but it was deadly, forcing extreme pressure on the body. The car slowed instantly by over 40 miles per hour, producing nearly 60 gigaseconds of force. The right side of the car crushed like paper, slamming into the wall inside. Earnhardt's body was thrown to the right. The left lap belt, already frayed, snapped under the pressure. The damage all occurred in less than a tenth of a second. And just like that, NASCAR's greatest legend was gone. Ken Schrader's haunting discovery after the cars came to rest on the grassy infield. Everything looked eerily calm. Dale's car wasn't in pieces, smoke wasn't rising, but Ken Schrader, who had also crashed, climbed out of his own car and limped toward Earnhardt's window. He wanted to check on his longtime friend. What he saw has stayed with him ever since. Even after 20 years, Schrader refuses to share the details of what he saw. All he has ever said is, "I just knew it wasn't good," instead of Earnhardt waving to the crowd or giving a sign. Schrader immediately began waving his arms wildly at the approaching safety crew. It was clear something was terribly wrong. His panic was the first sign to the world that this wasn't just another crash. Something serious had happened inside that car. As the safety team rushed in, hope faded fast. The doctor who knew right away, stewart-haas, was Daytona's chief emergency physician that day. He had been treating injured drivers for just over a year, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to witness. When he arrived at Earnhardt's car, he knew instantly. This was a worst-case scenario. Dale wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. There were visible signs of a basilar skull fracture, one of the most deadly head injuries in auto racing. Blood was coming from his ears, nose, and mouth. These were signs Dr. Bahanan never wanted to see. The medical team worked quickly. They cut the roof off the car, tried to open his airway, and began emergency resuscitation. But Bahanan could already tell this wasn't going to end well. Later, he admitted that when someone shows no signs of life after major trauma, the chances of survival are close to zero. Even so, they continued heroic efforts to bring him back. Time was running out, and so was hope. Earnhardt Jr.'s heartbreaking realization while doctors tried everything they could to save Dale Earnhardt, his son. Dale Earnhardt Jr. had just finished second in the race. He immediately ran toward the infield medical center, desperate to see his father. On the way, he saw Ken Schrader again, this time behind a curtain, being treated for his own injuries. When their eyes met, Dale Jr. saw the truth in Schrader's face. He didn't need to hear words. He knew. Meanwhile, Michael Waltrip was celebrating in Victory Lane, unaware of the tragedy unfolding just down the track. At the hospital, the situation was growing worse. Dr. Bahanan and his team of more than a dozen medical professionals tried every tool they had. They pumped blood, took x-rays, and worked to inflate Earnhardt's collapsed lungs. But nothing worked. Amid the controlled chaos, someone noticed a quiet figure standing in the corner. Teresa Earnhardt, Dale's wife. She never spoke. She didn't cry out. She just stood, watching as the love of her life slipped away. The moment everyone knew Dale Jr. was eventually allowed to look inside the trauma room. The moment he saw the doctors' and nurses' expressions, he knew the fight was over. His heart broke. He described a deep, uncontrollable noise coming from inside him, a sound of pain, shock, and sorrow. And then came the moment that stuck with everyone. A medical technician started to remove Dale Earnhardt's wedding ring. From the back of the room came a single word from Teresa. No. That one word said everything. Dr. Bahanan turned to the technician and said, "Do what she says." Then he quietly walked out of the room. That moment, quiet and emotional, stayed with him for the rest of his life. It was the final sign that the man known as the Intimidator was truly gone. NASCAR had lost its most iconic star in a crash that looked harmless but turned out to be one of the deadliest in racing history. The official report and what it revealed when NASCAR released the official crash report. The details were shocking. Dale Earnhardt had suffered a broken ankle, cracked ribs, and a fractured sternum. But the injury that killed him was the basilar skull fracture, a break in the bones. At the base of the skull, where it connects to the spine, his lap belt had snapped during the crash, and blood was found on almost every surface inside the cockpit. All of this happened in under 1 second. It was hard to imagine how such a short moment could cause so much damage, but it did. The report showed how close NASCAR drivers were riding to the edge, and how easily one mistake could lead to tragedy. That realization hit the sport hard. It became clear something had to change, and fast. A tragic death that saved lives that night. NASCAR President Mike Hilton stepped in front of reporters. He had just asked his team, "How in the world do I say we've lost Dale Earnhardt?" One of his colleagues replied, "Just like that." And so, with a heavy heart, Hilton made the announcement that stunned the racing world. Dale Earnhardt was dead. That one sentence changed NASCAR forever. Almost immediately, phone calls poured into the inventors of the Haas device ahead and neck restraint system. Earnhardt had refused to wear. Teams that had once ignored the device now demanded it. Within months, it became mandatory for every NASCAR driver. Safety improvements followed quickly. New seat belts, stronger roll cages, and energy-absorbing walls were added at every track. Cars were redesigned to better protect drivers from high-speed impacts. Dale Earnhardt's tragic death had sparked a movement. NASCAR was no longer going to wait for change. The cost had been to hide out the legacy of a racing legend since Dale Earnhardt's death in 2001. No NASCAR driver has died in a crash during a race. That fact alone shows how important his legacy is. While his fans remember him for his aggressive driving and bold personality, his greatest gift to the sport may be the safety improvements that followed his passing. His crash opened everyone's eyes to the real dangers drivers faced. The reforms that came after his death have saved countless lives. Every time a driver walks away from a wreck today, it's partly because of the painful lessons learned from Dale's final race. His story remains one of the most heartbreaking in sports history, but also one of the most impactful. He gave everything to racing, including his life, and in doing so, he made the sport better and safer for generations to come.